Hey guys, Sean Bucci here, surplusfundsriches.net. On the way back from the office actually right now. Got a lot of work to do at the home office. But I wanted to cover something that keeps coming up with folks. And that is the issue of a deed holder that has died. So first of all, if there was only one deed holder at the time of the sale, and this is why we have you do research, okay? Was there only one deed holder at the time of the sale and they've passed away? Well, unless you know the executor, and see the resources page on our programs for what we accept, but unless you know the executor or you've got a will in your hand, you usually can't work that. The executor could probably work it. But in order for that to count, obviously, there has to be an estate, aka probate file case opened, file or case opened. So, and that's rare. Now, briefly, I'm going to digress here. Believe it or not, in most instances, if somebody dies, the family does not, in most instances, open an estate file or probate file. And there's a couple of reasons for that. My personal experience has been that the person that was taking care of the individual was actually, they had access to the checking account and all the accounts, and frankly, they don't want to open up an estate or a probate file. They just want to let it lie, let it rest. They don't want to open up that file because they don't want to have to tell the court that they were dipping into the funds. And sometimes it's legitimate. They were using money to care for their parent or whoever it was that has passed. And sometimes it's legit, but they don't want to go through that. Okay? So let's get out of that situation. Let's say you have multiple deed holders. Let's say two. You have two deed holders and one of them has passed. Well, the first thing to understand is, unless it says otherwise on that deed, it's the number of people, okay, on that deed divided into 100%. So if there's two people, it's 50% each. So technically, if someone passed on that deed, there's no estate or probate file open, there's 40 grand in there, you can't open up, for some reason, open up a probate or an estate file, then you're going to work with the person that's alive and go after the 20 grand. The other option is it all depends on the deed. This is extremely important. Rewind this like 20 times, write notes, listen to me carefully. If the deed reads John Smith and Sarah Thompson, comma, joint tenants with rights of survivorship, or it says anything about survivorship, a survivorship deed, in that case, without opening up an estate or probate file, the property transfers from the deceased to the surviving person on that deed. Important to know. I'm going to come back to that, though, because time, dates of everything, date of the death, when you're working with overages, mean everything. Remember that, too. So if it says joint tenants with rights of survivorship or survivorship deed, something like that, that means it automatically transfers at time of death. You're still going to need the death certificate because the court's going to ask for that. You got to be able to show that they died, okay? The other thing is, in the vast majority, if not all states, I've never run into a state that doesn't have this. If it says John and Mary Smith, or like in North Carolina now, John and Tom Smith, or John Smith and Tom Weisinger, whatever, married. But they don't have to be opposite depending on the state. Some of them allow for same-sex marriage. Doesn't matter. Married, comma, married, okay? If it says that, it is assumed it is a joint tenants with rights of survivorship, which means that when someone dies on that deed, it transfers to the other person. Same thing if it's three people. That one-third interest would transfer to the other two people. Bear with me. Here's where it gets hinky. This is where dates are everything. If you're talking to someone and they say, hey, my husband died, he's not alive, right? Let's say the foreclosure, I'm recording this in 2021, June 28th, I believe, 2021. Let's say the foreclosure happened January 1st, 2021 at noon. Let's say they say, yes, he died January 1st, 2021 at 11:59 a.m., and that's what the death certificate says. That means at his death, it immediately transfers. Now, you've still got to, like I said, get a death certificate to show the court. It immediately transferred to her at his death 1 minute before the foreclosure. So she had full ownership of the house at the time of the foreclosure. She gets full ownership of the surplus funds, even if he died a minute before. The other side of that, let's say it was finalized, it was recorded, 12 noon, January 1st, 2028, the foreclosure was done, everything was recorded, right? 12:01, he passes away. Does she get 100% of the overage? No. At the time of the foreclosure, they both had a 50% interest in that property. Think about that. So what does that mean? Well, Sean, that doesn't matter. Yeah, it does. Well, depending on the state, your husband dies, you don't get all that money. You don't get the entire estate. There could have been a will that said his portion of the deed was transferred to his kids. There could have been a will saying, it could have been anything that could have come up, right? This could come up in a state or a probate issue. But the bottom line is, I saw this happen with my own eyes. The guy had kids from a previous marriage. He died after the foreclosure. Okay, so at the time of the foreclosure, everything's frozen in time. That's why we want to know how it stood time of the foreclosure. It's frozen in time, half her, half him. Okay, he passes away later. That property isn't there to transfer. So his interest has to go through a state of probate, which means his interest in that money is divided up between the wife, depending on the state, the wife, kids, whatever they have set in that particular state. In a lot of states, 50% of that would go to the wife, and then a certain portion would go to all surviving heirs, and she'd end up with, it's a lot of complicated calculation. So the bottom line is, the time and date of the death means everything. And while we're on this subject, let's say you are going after a deal, and the gentleman died, and you're trying to figure out heirs. We typically avoid that because it means you have to open up an estate or a probate file. Yes, I know you can see on obituaries who the surviving people are. That doesn't mean anything. He might have willed it to someone. The vast majority of wills, here's another nugget I'm dropping, the vast majority of wills are not recorded. Doesn't mean they don't count, but they need to be notarized, and you need to have the original. Okay? If a property was willed to another person at the time of death of the deed holder, one deed holder, the property is willed to somebody else. He dies before the foreclosure. That means whoever he willed it to owned the property at the time of the foreclosure. That person's entitled to surplus. If he dies after the foreclosure, the property had been taken away from him, technically, prior to that foreclosure. Now you got another issue you got to talk to an attorney about. So it gets hinky, guys. But again, a survivorship deed, if it reads survivorship and the person died prior to the foreclosure, all the interest went to the surviving person. All right? That's important to understand. I think you guys are kind of getting a grasp here of what we do and why the details are extremely important. Hope this has helped you. We are going to have a webinar. We have them every other Thursday, live question and answer webinar. There will be one coming up on the 1st of July, this Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Those of you guys that have signed in, you will get an email invitation to that. If you've signed in on our website, surplusfundsriches.net, click on the products tab, sign in. Okay? Those of you guys that have signed in will get the invite. I'm going to do an invite today, and then I'm going to do another one probably either the day before or day of the webinar. So if you're seeing this prior to then, sign in for that. Another way to get to there is surplusfundsriches.net. Click on the link to our Facebook page, our company Facebook page, and there will always be a link there to upcoming live question and answer webinars. Hope this has helped you guys. Regardless of what you decide to do, I hope you have a great summer, and